When I'm practicing and when I'm teaching, I think a lot about technique. Poor technique can get in the way of your best music making, and that's no good. The music is the most important thing, right? But there are a few technique choices I see people make that are so widespread and common, even among critically acclaimed guitarists, that I kinda disagree with. And my disagreements with those techniques come from my education and training as a guitarist, where I was taught things that are contrary to what I commonly see. So I'm kind of biased. One of those things is bringing your thumb over the neck. This right here. I see so many people do this. From amateurs to professionals to legendary guitarists. Case in point, Eric Johnson playing some shreddy stuff in Cliffs of Dover. A lot of the time, people seem to do it kind of arbitrarily, like it's not a conscious choice, but sometimes it's for the purpose of fretting notes on the sixth string. Eric Clapton, Eric Johnson, John Mayer are a few who do that quite often. As you may know, most of my formal training is in classical guitar. My first love as a guitarist was the rock and metal music I was getting exposed to when I was in high school. I used to play a lot of Metallica and things like that, and I'm sure I had all kinds of bad technique habits back then. I was mostly self-taught. When I started college, I majored in music, and it was suddenly all classical guitar. And early on, I had to beat some bad techniques and make some adjustments to how I approached the guitar. One of the most important things I was taught is that your thumb should not peek out from behind the neck. The pad of your thumb should be anchored lightly on the back of the neck for balance. Doing so allows greater dexterity and precision in the fingers. It also encourages a straight wrist, which is super important to avoid injuries. And when I was home between semesters, I'd pick up the Explorer on occasion, and I found that my technique on electric guitar was improving massively as a result of this technique focus on classical. It all translates, including keeping your thumb behind the neck. This is a big thing in classical guitar, and part of it is because of the instrument design. Classical guitars today have these big, wide necks and usually a 650mm scale, so it's not very ergonomic for bringing your thumb over anyway. But what's interesting is that this idea of bringing the thumb over the neck to fret notes on the sixth string is not a modern innovation. There's evidence that this was done in romantic guitar music 150, 200 years ago. Check out these couple bars from Mauro Giuliani's Rossiniana No. 1, first published in 1821. Just based on the notes in this first measure, Giuliani would have intended the repeated B's in the bass to be fretted at the 7th fret with the thumb over the neck. There's no other way to do it. To play all the top notes, you need all 4 of your other fingers. Back then, guitars were quite a bit smaller than these Torres style ones we use today, and the necks were thinner, so this wouldn't have been unreasonably challenging. The bigger instruments we use today present a challenge for people learning this piece. It's really, really difficult to do it the way Giuliani intended on these big guitars. I have pretty big hands, and even I have a hard time with it, especially when it comes time to switch back to a normal playing position. So is this unplayable on a modern instrument? No, it's not. The common solution is to play an outrageous multi-fret bar, where you bar diagonally from the 7th fret on the 6th string to the 6th fret for the A sharp on the 1st string. Still not easy, but it's easier than bringing the thumb over the neck. Some music from this time period even includes a special notation indicating thumb over the neck, like this piece by Johann Caspar Merz. But even with this historical legitimization of thumb over neck, I still find myself not wanting to do it. I mean, yeah, it's really clunky and impractical on a modern classical guitar, but I'm talking about on an electric. I still don't want to do it even with the thinner neck. Doing so basically means you're cradling the back of the neck with this part of your hand, which means your fingers are now super contracted, limiting their mobility. And it makes it hard to reach the notes on the lower strings without laying your fingers totally flat. It also means you're extending your wrists, so there's a lot more wrist motion involved if you're trying to play cleaner stuff on the lower strings. I just feel much more in control when the pad of my thumb is on the back of the neck all the time. I can play more technical stuff with greater ease. I can reach further with more comfort. And I can play not so technical stuff with greater consistency. Even though the thinner necks on electric guitars allow my thumb to come over, it's still not my default. And yet, most electric guitarists, as far as I can tell, bring their thumb over the neck. I've had this practice of keeping your thumb back heavily reinforced over the years studying classical guitar. So I can't help but look around and think, is everyone doing this wrong? I mean, I don't think I'm wrong. My left-hand technique works super well for me. I know this. But some people get great results bringing their thumb over. John Mayer can practically play full bass lines with his thumb over the neck. But I have a feeling many haven't given much thought to why they do it as their default in normal playing. It probably just feels comfortable. There are only two scenarios where I actually do bring my thumb over. One, when I'm strumming a bunch of big chords and I use it to mute the lower strings. Two, for this one minor seventh chord voicing, but I don't always do that. Most of the time I'll just bar it. So, some concluding thoughts on this. One, I'm not saying you shouldn't have your thumb over the neck for normal playing, but you should assess whether or not that's the best default positioning for you. You should know why you do it, just like I know why I don't do it. Two, monkey see, monkey do is not always a good approach to technique. Just because John Mayer can play intricate stuff incorporating his thumb doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way to do things. It works well for him, which is exactly why I can't tell you not to do that. It might work well for you, but you should be able to demonstrate why it works well for you. My big point is this. Think about your technique. You don't need to get paranoid like you've been playing guitar wrong your whole life, but you should spend some time actively reflecting on your playing and look for areas you can improve upon and how you can improve them. That's just part of practicing. That's how you get better. I can spot questionable technique habits in my students a mile away, and I can point it out to them and guide them to making improvements. But it's their job to do the bulk of the self-reflection and do the work on exploring those improvements. You can do that with or without a teacher, but a second opinion is often super helpful. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Maybe I've given you something to think about. I have a new video out every Thursday. I teach private guitar, music theory, and composition lessons over Zoom. I have some openings right now. If that's of interest to you, please feel free to message me. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.